that should work. That should work. Can you hear me? Testing. There it goes. Okay. Okay. All right. I think we've got it set up correctly now. So on this stream, I am going live here. Maybe I will. I don't know how long it's going to last. This is still kind of experimental. I am teaching some philosophy courses uh, next semester, and I need to brush up on my history of philosophy. It's just a good thing to do um, periodically, and I thought I would create kind of this obsidian vault here. I don't know if anybody watching has used obsidian. Really nice kind of mind mapping software, I guess. So the intention here is to go from uh, Thales as far as we can, starting with the pre-Socratic philosophers. Kind of typically, that is who is considered the sort of beginning of Western philosophy. Um, and we'll see how far we get. We might get to Socrates. We might not get to Socrates. I mean, the pre-Socratics themselves are very interesting. But really, and maybe we'll patchwork around. I don't know. I'm just going to be building this vault here, and I figured maybe some of you would want to come along for the ride. I'm going to be using this Pomodoro timer, so even if you just want to use this as an excuse to, you know, do sprints or something, that might work as well. You don't necessarily need to be following along everything I'm doing here. Um, but with that said, I'm just going to be putting together kind of. I'm hoping this vault here will be my the beginning of a reference source that I'll be able to come back to and update again and again and again. I'm gonna take. I know I just started. I'm gonna take a very quick break before we begin. Let me see if I can. So, I've got one of my favorite books to teach is the Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. Um, I kind of, in my previous courses, I've done a course where I spent a little more time on the pre-Socratics. Um, Last course, I spent like half the class on the Nicomachean Ethics. Reason being, it's an amazing book. We got some really loud landscaping going on outside, but that's just what happens, I guess. They'll move soon. Um, but yeah, I've taught some classes where we were kind of heavy on the pre-Socratics. I've taught classes where we're really heavy on Aristotle's ethics. Um, but just for my own kind of benefit, I want to try to get a mind map started of the history of Western philosophy, just so I can have some hooks to kind of hang information on. You know, I have a general understanding, obviously, of Western philosophy. I've been studying it for a long time. Um, but I kind of want to get in the weeds, come in and out of the weeds a little bit here, and we'll see what happens. So I'm going to do this in 25-minute bursts, sprints, as they say. Hopefully that'll keep the momentum going. Maybe we'll do, who knows how many sprints we'll do. We'll sprint until I get tired. So that might be one. Hey, how's it going? Nothing. How you doing? We'll go until I get tired. Might be one sprint, might be two sprints. Maybe we'll do a little now and a little in the afternoon. I don't know. Well, later in the afternoon. Maybe we'll come back tomorrow. Maybe we won't. No promises. I'm just kind of experimenting around with this streaming thing. I love YouTube personally. I tried Twitch and I don't know. It just doesn't work for me. All right. So if you want to be along for the ride, we can study philosophy together. If you got other work you want to do and you just want to do sprints with me, feel free. I'm gonna go ahead and start the timer here. Just in terms of the physical books I'm referencing, I know histories of philosophy have their weaknesses, except for, of course, Copleston. But I like this one. This is Anthony Kenny's History of Western Philosophy. I like it because it is just one big, thick volume with the whole history from start to finish in it. I don't agree with him on everything. But, this is what I always tell my students, too. Even if you don't have the right understanding of the overarching history of philosophy, it's helpful to at least have a narrative that you can then continually challenge and shape as you learn more about the particulars. So even my narrative is constantly being updated, just by going into, anytime you go into a primary source, like you read Aristotle or you read Plato or whatever, the primary sources themselves are always way more complex and I guess interesting than the general theory that you will hear about them if you listen to somebody just spouting off about the history of philosophy, which is something that I love to do. Every narrative of the history of philosophy is wrong to some extent, right? So when we say, for example, that, for example, when we talk about Cartesian dualism, right? That's a view that he certainly held, But it's very easy to sort of make him kind of a punching bag. But you go and you actually read Descartes, and I think he's a lot more interesting and a little more nuanced than a lot of his critics, for example. Well, enough about that. Let's get started. Um, I'm going to be putting together this Obsidian Vault and clicking around, typing around. If you got any questions or you just want to talk, feel free to drop in the chat. Let's get started. We're starting with Thales, often considered the first Western philosopher. So let me see what I got here. I also say that, like, Wikipedia, I know a lot of people consider it kind of like a unreliable source. To some degree, that's true. But it's a really good starting place, I think. Nothing, you're here. You're from Nepal. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. You know, I don't really know how to do. Okay. So let's do this. Let's pull up Thales. All right. Here's Thales of Miletus. Thales of Miletus. So this, I guess, is this a bust we have of him here? The ancient Greek philosopher Thales was born in Miletus in Greek Ionia. Aristotle, the major source for Thales' philosophy and science, identified Thales as the first person to investigate the basic principles. The question of the originating substances of matter, and therefore as the founder of the school of natural philosophy. You know, funny enough, Aristotle, widely considered to be the first historian of philosophy. If you go read the Metaphysics, that's where he kind of divides the different philosophers that have come before him into theorists of different types of causation. That's kind of how Aristotle sliced up the history of Western philosophy, right? He said, you know, certain philosophers were concerned with the material cause, certain philosophers were concerned with the formal cause, right? But obviously, Aristotle is the one who is concerned with all types of causation. That's typically how a lot of, especially older historians of philosophy work, right? They're doing the history of philosophy in order to demonstrate how everybody else is wrong and they're right, which, of course, is a difficult position to hold if you have any epistemic humility. But it does make for interesting histories, that's for sure. It makes for strong narratives. Okay. So I've got Thales here. I've got like a pre-Socratics node. I guess I'll go ahead and just fill this in just a little bit. Pre-Socratics, philosophers before Socrates. I'm sure we'll fill that up more as we continue. How do I get back to the... How do I get back to the graph view? So we've got Thales of Miletus. He's a pre-Socratic. He's also from Ionia. There's quite a few Ionian philosophers, and I'm sure we'll get to a couple of them. What are some other big connections from Thales? I guess we should kind of say, let's see, he's into natural philosophy. I'm not being too systematic about this. I'm just hoping to develop some big connections here. He's also what they call monist. Monism meaning from the same root as mono, meaning one, a single thing, right? And monists typically are looking for a singular principle to explain all of reality. And a lot of these first philosophers were monists. They were positing different singular principles to explain reality. So for Thales, that was water, right? So let's take a look here. We'll put this over to the side. So we don't know if Thales wrote anything. I know we have two sayings from Thales that we can definitely attribute to him. One is that all things are full of gods. Let's see if we can find that here. Yeah, all things are full of gods. And what else? Primary principle. Everything is made of water. This is from Aristotle's Metaphysics, right? Kind of our first history of philosophy here. Thales says that nature is water. So, let's get this quote in here. But he became tentative when he proposed reasons which might have justified Thales' decision. Thales' supposition may have arisen from observation. So, let's get some sources here. We'll say Aristotle's Metaphysics, and we've got. If you hear panting, that's my dog who is now really intently observing whatever is out there in the parking lot. It's all right, buddy. We're gonna be okay. Thank you for looking out for us. Okay, so we've got Aristotle's Metaphysics. 983? Looks like 983. Okay. Let's keep rolling here a little bit. Okay, yeah, so this is interesting. Maybe Thales thought everything was water because metallurgy, right? Metallurgy had been practiced, which basically means that, they've been melting down metal into a liquid state, right? Um, you could also say, obviously it makes sense that everything is water if you are just observing the natural world and you see animals, and plants and things sort of growing and thriving around water. That makes sense. Rudran Sharma, hello, brother. Nice to hear from you. So he thought obviously the Earth floats on water. This is fun. There's really not a whole lot to Thales because we don't have any of his writings. Oh, some funny stories about Thales though. Um, he so there's two stories. One, he predicted an eclipse. He was maybe one of the first ones to predict an eclipse. I don't know exactly the history there, but he predicted an eclipse successfully, which was impressive to to the people around him, obviously. But the other story, let's see if they even have it in here. Yeah, so we've got. Yes, so because Thales was a natural philosopher, he was very attentive to nature, right? Natural philosopher, that makes sense. During this period, philosophy and science are not super distinct, right? They're not totally separate. We don't really have science as we know it. We don't really have philosophy as we know it. Religion is kind of mixed in to all of this stuff. So in the pre-Socratics, you have a combination of religion, philosophy, and science all kind of happening at the same time in the same thinkers. But anyways, Thales was an observer of nature, um, and he was able to predict when there would be a um, when there would be a really big olive crop. And what he did was he bought up all of the olive presses before this big crop came in, and then ended up making a lot of money. I can't remember. I think renting them out, right? So interesting little thing, and I believe it's Aristotle who says that um, this story kind of proves that philosophers could make money if we wanted to. We could make money if we wanted to, but obviously we're much more noble than that, right? Um, so it's a funny little story about Thales, the capitalist, right? Okay. Sharma says, I don't know much philosophy, but I like Camus. All right. Camus is one of those that I really haven't read much of. I mean, I know his basic ideas about absurdism and things like that, but I haven't read Sisyphus. I haven't read The Stranger. I studied a lot of Kierkegaard, who is one of the really important philosophers for the existentialists, but he himself is was not necessarily isn't always considered an existentialist. Sometimes he's considered a proto-existentialist along with Nietzsche. How did he know? I'm not sure exactly. I'm not sure. The idea here is that he was just observing the. How did Thales know that the olive crop was going to be good? He was just a really careful observer of nature. We don't have a whole lot written down, so I would have to go back to Aristotle's Metaphysics and revisit that idea. Okay. So Thales founded a new school of philosophy. Again, this is coming out of Aristotle's Metaphysics 983. He's our first historian of philosophy. He's how we know a lot about the pre-Socratics. Thales was the founder of the first school of philosophy. His two fellow Milesians also engaged in the new questioning approach to understanding the universe. So Anaximander and Anaximenes. When we get to Anaximenes, I really enjoy. I enjoy him a lot. So this questioning approach, there's an interesting thing here when I teach my undergrad courses. We talk about. I have the book somewhere. It's a slim little volume on the pre-Socratics from, I don't know, the 60s or something. Maybe a little outdated, but what I find is that a lot of those older books, a lot of the books from sort of the middle of the 20th century, they just have really nice, clear English prose, Anyways, this book, I have a whole stack over here, and if I move one, it's all going to fall over, so I'm not going to look for it. There was a transition in sort of social. There's a transition. So you're asking about the new questioning approach. Well, this is exactly what I'm explaining. So, good question. So there's a sort of approach to cosmology, and by cosmology we just mean the study of the universe, theorizing about the universe. There's this approach to cosmology prior to the pre-Socratics, which is mostly kind of religious, right? So, for example, you have Homer talking about the gods. You believe in sort of these divine beings. It's kind of part of your tradition. Everybody just kind of accepts it. And then as we move from more of a monarchical society where somebody just sort of tells you what to do, and we move to an oligarchic society where now we have people who get together and they have to argue about laws, for example. Now all of a sudden we have to start arguing to convince each other of what is true and what is false, right? So a king can't just tell you to do whatever he wants you to do. If you have an oligarchy, now you have multiple people that have power and multiple people that have to decide on what the laws are. Now all of a sudden we have to argue, right? And this is how, through argument, people start to appeal to reason, right? It's not that reason never existed before. It's just that it becomes very important, right? Now this questioning approach kind of to philosophy began when they stopped sort of it stopped sort of trusting religious authority to have the final word, right? So this Milesian school, they just wandered around asking questions. What is the universe made of? How can we prove it? Can we prove what it's made of? Can we verify it? Right? Does it make sense? Is it reasonable? Are the answers that we're giving, right? So now we're moving away from a sort of idea of religious revelation almost down to this kind of philosophical approach where now you're using reason and you're using critical questioning to sort of learn more about the natural world, right? Okay. He was one of the 7 sages of ancient Greece. Let's look at the heritage. Thales is the first person about whom we know to propose explanations of natural phenomena which were materialistic rather than mythological or theological. Right? That's kind of what I was talking about just a second ago. His theories were new, bold, exciting, comprehensible, and possible of explanation. He did not speak in riddles, as did Heraclitus. Heraclitus, another important pre Socratic philosopher, who we will get to. Maybe not today. Heraclitus thought everything was fire. Heraclitus is really fun to read. He wrote in a bunch of very cryptic fragments. Okay, I lost my place here. Oh, okay. In the chat, we've got a question about philosophy. I know that no one was ever able to answer all the questions, but was there someone who came really close? Well, so that's interesting. There's a there's a question about what philosophy actually is. Can you have a definitive answer to a philosophical question? A lot of people would say no. Once you do have a definitive answer, you're not doing philosophy anymore. You're probably doing science, or something else. In terms of which philosopher was the most ambitious, I think, let me see if I have his book over here. I think that I don't see the book. Anyways, I think that Hegel is probably the most ambitious philosopher. Let me, you know what? Let's look at Hegel. Why not? This is Hegel, our boy. Oh, it's just an image. Hold on. Let's look at the Stanford Encyclopedia entry on Hegel. Can't read the source. Oh, is my is the screen really low resolution? I apologize if that's the case. This is the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. It's a free website. You can hop around on here and learn a ton about. I mean, it's a fantastic resource, and it's free. These articles are peer reviewed, which means that experts are kind of checking to make sure that these sources are up to standard, and it's published. It's like updated quite often. Oh, okay. Yes, good. So earlier, one chatter was asking about who came close to answering all the questions in philosophy. I don't know if that's exactly the right question, but what I think is that the most ambitious philosopher a lot of people consider to be Hegel. Hegel was a German philosopher in the 18th and 19th century, and he is widely considered to be sort of one of the most profound philosophers of history, and one of the most profound philosophers, period. He's incredibly difficult to read. He's very, very difficult to read, at least for me. I had a roommate, actually, in grad school who was a Hegel guy, and he could read German really well. I can't really read German that easily. But he said Hegel was very easy to read. I disagree, and I think most people disagree. Hegel's very difficult. But he was part of a movement called German idealism. Now, I'm trying to decide how much detail to go into here. In modern philosophy, so you have Descartes, for example. who was a rationalist, believed that we have kind of innate ideas. That so he found, for example, the idea of God. He thought that we couldn't come up with that idea; that we just have the idea of God in ourselves, right? And so he is a rationalist. And there was also an approach that rejected rationalism called empiricism. So, like David Hume, for example, is an example of an empiricist. Kant kind of wanted to mediate between these two schools. So, empiricism says we need to only trust our senses, only things that can be sort of verified by our senses, by observation, right? And Kant kind of sort of combined these two schools into something called idealism. And essentially, he talks about how sense experience is sort of combined with these innate structures of the mind to create intelligible experience, right? After Kant, you have a lot of German philosophers responding to him, and Hegel is kind of the last one in many ways here. The last big German idealist. So Hegel's had an enormous influence. Obviously, Karl Marx was hugely influenced by Hegel. If you've ever checked out, for example, Slavoj Žižek is a contemporary Hegelian philosopher. He does some weird stuff with psychoanalysis too. But yeah, Hegel, very ambitious philosopher. Let's see if we can just... So the most systematic of idealists, Hegel attempted throughout his published writings as well as in his lectures to elaborate a comprehensive and systematic philosophy from a purportedly logical starting point. He is perhaps most well known for his teleological account of history. Teleology just meaning that history has an aim, right? History is going somewhere. His teleological account of history, an account that was later taken over by Karl Marx and inverted into a materialist theory of historical development culminating in communism. To be clear, Hegel was not a communist. Marx was. We'll get to the distinction later, I'm sure. While idealist philosophies in Germany postdated Hegel, the movement commonly known as German idealism effectively, like I said, ended with Hegel's death. Basic idea of Western philosophy like existentialism, nihilism, absurdism, stoicism, but want to read in depth. Don't really want to read dark philosophy, which can affect me mentally. Can you suggest one? Oh, that's interesting. So it depends on your tastes, I guess, a lot of the time. I personally really, last night, actually, I just picked up Spinoza. Spinoza is I think, a very joyful philosopher. He takes a lot of ideas kind of from Stoicism. He's also kind of a pantheist. Some people do compare. Actually, I saw a lot of people comparing Spinoza's philosophy to Buddhism, which is interesting. But I would say Spinoza is a good place to start if you're looking for something cheerful. I don't know if he's really cheerful, but he's not dark, is what I would say. I would say he's pretty optimistic about the ability for us to find happiness through reason, right? There's actually a video. Let me see if I can. I'll show you the video real quick. It's a very good introduction to Spinoza. Okay. I'm not gonna play through it right now, but I'll just show it to you. and I'll drop a link in the chat. This is a channel called Then and Now. This guy does really great sort of documentary style, I guess, accessible videos about Spinoza, or about philosophy in general, and this one on Spinoza is really good. There we go. There's a link in the chat. So yeah, I would say Spinoza is a good place to start. And he is not a dark philosopher. I think he's pretty optimistic, actually. This is a good video to check out. And I would say start with the ethics. I really like his ethics. It's not a very thick book, actually. His method's a little weird. It's a little strange. He tries to argue from like, I guess like definitions in some ways, like as if it was almost like trying to prove metaphysics in a geometrical kind of way, in a similar way to Euclid, which I find that kind of argumentation a little odd. I think a lot of people do, but there's also something kind of enchanting about it. So yeah, I would say start with Spinoza, start with the ethics. As someone who studies philosophy, how do you know what to believe yourself? Because I find myself going from one philosophy to another, thinking this sounds good. Yeah. No, that's a good question. How do I know what to believe myself? I think, personally, and I don't really like to talk about what I believe, especially when I'm teaching class, for example. I don't ever talk about my personal beliefs. I just talk about how to think critically, how to try to determine truth, and how to read difficult texts. Those are the main skills that I'm after when I'm teaching students. As far as how I relate to philosophy and what I find convincing or compelling, I kind of try to see the effects that a philosophy has on my life, right? I try to see the effects that a philosophy has on my mood, on the way I feel about the world, right? Which is partially why I recommended Spinoza, is because I was watching this video last night and reading a little bit in the ethics, and I found myself just like kind of feeling good about the world, feeling a sense of wonder about the world, and when if a philosophy makes me feel good, makes me feel like I have some peace of mind, makes me feel like my decisions matter, right? Then I'm going to recommend that philosophy. Ultimately, I think philosophy is kind of like a mental apparatus. Like what you're doing is you're building a system of concepts, right? And there's this mental apparatus of ideas that you walk around with. And when you read philosophy, you're kind of subtly shifting around this mental apparatus of ideas. And as these ideas shift around, the world starts to look a little different. The world starts to feel a little different. So my advice would just be to read widely and come back to the authors that seem to make your life better, right? Spinoza is a good one. Also, a lot like Stoicism is really popular, right? It's a very practical philosophy, but a lot of people I know, they approach Stoicism and find a lot of empowerment through it. So what do I actually believe? I mean, it's complicated, right? I mean, about what, right? About God, about the world, about the self, right? There's a lot of different particular things we could get into. But I think at the end of the day, my bottom line is, yes, my beliefs do change a lot. kind of like you, I read a lot, and every time I finish reading a compelling book, I'm inclined to agree with the author, right? But you kind of let that cool down a little bit, let it settle, um, let it sort of change you a little bit, and see how that feels. And I think the things that feel good, you should. I mean, this is a very simplistic way of saying this. Obviously, you want to make sure something is reasonable, right? And that the arguments are not easily shot down. Because if they are, then it's difficult to accept. But at the end of the day, the payoff really is: does this system of belief make your life more worth living? Right? Does it make your life better, or does it make your life worse? As you mentioned above, things like existentialism, nihilism, and absurdism, right? Psychoanalysis is another one that I find is really fascinating, and I get a lot of. I think a lot of psychoanalytic concepts are helpful, but it can sometimes be kind of a depressing, worldview. So psychoanalysis is one I would avoid if you're trying to stay out of like sort of pessimistic philosophies. I ended my course last semester with Freud's Civilization and its Discontents. Freud is a he's a pessimist about human nature and about civilization. Very insightful, but very pessimistic. Anyways, I'm rambling at this point. Let's get back to Hegel here. Hegel. All right. We'll skip over the biography. I actually do think biography is an important aspect of understanding a philosopher, trying to understand where they come from and what motivates them. I think biography can be helpful. Historical situation, especially, is very helpful. Very helpful to know, but we'll go ahead and skip to the philosophy side of things here. Like Hegel's own pithy account of the nature of philosophy is given in the preface to his Elements on the Philosophy of Right. It captures a characteristic tension in his philosophical approach, and in particular in his approach to the nature and limits of human cognition. Philosophy, he says there, is its own time comprehended in thoughts. On the one hand, we can clearly see in the phrase its own time the suggestion of an historical or cultural conditionedness and a variability which applies even to the highest form of human cognition, philosophy itself. Now, this is really a key kind of idea in Hegel, that we're not capable of just simply sort of ascending to contemplate the truth right away. We have to go through stages of intellectual development, right, in order to gradually comprehend more and more of the truth. And for Hegel, this happens on an individual level, right? You're not just born knowing the nature of the universe, right? You gradually, through your own development and your own philosophical education, become more and more capable of knowledge, right? Profound knowledge. But it's not just something that happens in the individual. It's also something that happens over the course of the history of philosophy. So for Hegel, he goes back and reads the entire history of philosophy as this process of development that's gradually unfolding into more and more profound understandings of being, right? And each stage along the way is sort of necessary in order to prepare the way for the next stage, right? This is sometimes you'll hear the word dialectics. For Hegel, the dialectic is this kind of unfolding of deeper and deeper insight in history through sort of philosophical debate, right? And this happens in philosophy. It also happens in like culture and religion, right? Hegel saw this dialectic sort of unfolding across every sphere of life, and across history and the individual, right? So history and historical conditions are extremely important for Hegel's understanding of philosophy. Okay, the contents of philosophical knowledge, we might suspect, will come from the historically changing contents of its cultural context. On the other, there is the hint of such contents being raised to some higher level. So being raised to a higher level is kind of this idea of sort of moving beyond one philosophical position and being able to see it contextualized within sort of, whereas some things just seem to be oppositional, right? So for example, I believe in God, this man in the sky, versus I'm an atheist, I don't believe in God at all. Well, when you actually look at these two positions, they kind of both have a point in a way, right? There is a negation of what this sort of picture of God as a man in the sky. That's maybe not an adequate picture of God. On the other hand, simple atheism might have its issues too. For Hegel, philosophical understanding is being able to take both of these positions and understand their relative truth, and to be able to contextualize them within the unfolding of reason in history. The first paragraph of Meditations by René Descartes has gotten stapled in my mind. He explains that he must reject any belief that is slightly doubtful as a way to ensure the certainty of knowledge. Yes, Descartes' radical doubt, his method of doubt, is very interesting. I love teaching Descartes. I have his book over there somewhere in the tower of books that I don't want to retrieve because then they'll all fall down. But yeah, Descartes' method of doubt is very interesting for sure. He's quite a bit earlier than Hegel, quite a bit later than the pre-Socratics. But yeah, when we cover Descartes, it's a good time. Maybe I don't. Maybe we'll get to Descartes today. Okay, let's keep going here on Hegel. Hegel sometimes referred to the task of philosophy as that of recognizing the concept in mere representations of everyday life. Right. So there's this kind of work of like historical interpretation that's really important for Hegelianism. I forget which chatter originally asked about Hegel. Well, okay. Let's keep going. Let's go ahead and why don't we add Hegel to our chart here. Hegel, we'll say he's part of German idealism. And who else is connected to German idealism? We have Fichte. And the other one is Schelling. Now Schelling's interesting because he's actually very similar to the kind of like natural philosophy of the pre-Socratics in a lot of ways. At least that's the way I see him. He's obviously he's more sophisticated in a lot of ways because he has several he has thousands of years more of philosophical history to draw from. But Schelling's an interesting guy. Schelling is probably my favorite personally of the German idealists. All right. So this kind of the pre-Socratics. So this is going to be kind of, if we could divide it up, this is going to be ancient philosophy, and this German idealism that's is basically 18th, 19th century modern philosophy. All right. This is a good point to take a break. I'm going to set the timer for 5 minutes. I'm going to go grab a bite, be right back, and we'll keep going on. We'll keep going on philosophy. I'm gonna keep going. I guess we'll just kind of go ad hoc. I do really enjoy interacting with the chat. So if you have any other philosophers you want to deal with, I know the last chatter wanted to talk about Descartes. So maybe after we do a little more coverage of Hegel, we'll take a quick look at Descartes. I think Descartes really fun. So I'll be right back. All right. We're back. Let me just shoot off a text real quick. Okay. Would be nice to know more. Oh, about Descartes. Cogito ergo sum. Yeah, we can talk about the cogito if you want. One second. Okay. Jason North, hi. How you doing? We're so I'm building a just for myself. I'm building a obsidian vault here. So let's go through here. Is this application Obsidian? Yes, this is Obsidian. Very very useful for note taking, because Obsidian allows you to save notes, but also to have them kind of connected together. So, for example, anytime you want to connect, uh, anytime you want to connect a note to something else, you can just do it from within, and you go out here to the graph view, and you see all the connections. So, for example, here we've got the pre-Socratics. Um, we started with Thales, and connected him to a few concepts. So we've got the pre-Socratics. We're gonna probably add other pre-Socratics eventually. I'm just gonna keep chipping away at this map. I guess this Obsidian vault of Western philosophy, little by little. Obviously, I'm interacting a lot with the chat, so we're kind of bouncing back and forth through different things. But maybe that's the way to do it. It's a little more fun, at least. But yes, this is Obsidian. Cogito ergo sum. Yeah, we'll get to that. Seems like we want to talk about Descartes. That's good with me. Eastern philosophy seems to point toward direct experiential knowledge beyond reasoning, while Western philosophy appears more conceptual. Is one approach more effective for profound understanding? Good question. So I think, first of all, I think that you're correct that the way that Eastern philosophy and Western philosophy are often characterized definitely tends toward that idea that, Eastern philosophy is very mystical and Western philosophy is very rational. I don't think that that is exactly correct, though. So, for example, if you look at Platonism, Plato, Neoplatonism, so like figures like Plotinus, right? There are very, very mystical elements in Western philosophy. Um, Additionally, if you look at, for example, the empiricists, they're very, very focused on experiential knowledge. Now, they take it sort of in more of a um, conceptual direction, to use your language. I don't know that much about Eastern philosophy. I know a little bit about Buddhism. I know I have read a very tiny, tiny amount of Indian philosophy. I actually think, from what I have been exposed to, those characterizations of Eastern and Western philosophy are ultimately not accurate. And I also know that in Eastern philosophy, you get a lot of very scholastic, very technical debates, especially in sort of scholastic Buddhism. Um, so, yeah, I'm not sure that that distinction is totally accurate. Now, as far as which path I think is more effective for a profound understanding, the way I think about it is this: concepts, and I said this a few minutes ago. Um, so if I'm repeating myself to anyone in chat, I apologize. But concepts and conceptual systems are kind of a perceptual apparatus for us, right? Whenever you change the concepts that you're thinking about, whenever you change the beliefs that you hold, it sort of very subtly shifts the way that you experience the world, right? So I think conceptual analysis and argumentation, this kind of thing, is a very important element of changing your perception of the world, right? Philosophy is a way of transforming your perception of the world. That's or your sort of perception in general, right? Your perception of the world, your perception of God, your perception of yourself, right? And so I see philosophy as a kind of tool for modifying your perceptions. That would be how I would think about that. So philosophy is sort of one practice among many. So if by philosophy we just mean like rational argumentation, I don't think that is everything or even necessarily the most important thing, but it is a very powerful tool. I think in a lot of ways, whatever is the best approach a lot of times just kind of depends on the person, depends on your dispositions, depends on your background, just depends on what you find interesting, what kind of ways you want to challenge yourself. So I know that maybe isn't a super satisfying answer, but that's kind of how I think about philosophy. So, all right. Do y'all want to keep going on Hegel, or do you want to jump into Descartes? Let's give this a quick skim. The traditional metaphysical view of Hegel's philosophy. Now, I should point out here, I know a couple of you, yeah, we'll move on to Descartes. Okay, I'll say this thing and then we'll go to Descartes. A couple of you were talking about existentialism. Hegel, how would we say, Hegel inspired a lot of people to react against him. Yes, Hegel is a bit difficult to understand for sure. Hegel, so his system, as I said, is based on the unfolding of reason in history, and so the guy I studied a lot in grad school, Soren Kierkegaard, kind of the proto-existentialist. He was reacting against Hegel because he thought all this emphasis on history and this emphasis on sort of ideas and sort of Geist, right, the spirit of history, kind of made the decisions of the individual kind of irrelevant. And that's how you get existentialism sort of coming out saying, no, actually, like, history is absurd. There's no real reason sort of moving through history. There's no teleology. Actually, what really matters is your responsibility to live your life as an individual, right? And no kind of historical spirit is going to subsume you up into this bigger historical narrative, right? That you actually, as a single individual, are radically free, and you can, and you don't necessarily have a fixed telos, right? Really interesting kind of tension there. A lot of the 19th and 20th centuries are reactions against Hegel, actually. Okay. If you want to understand Hegel, I don't really have a. I don't have a great. I don't have a great easy way to do it. I mean, Hegel's just really hard. I would say Gregory Sadler on YouTube has a video series. Are any of you familiar with Greg Sadler? He has this series on the phenomenology of spirit. So I'm going to link this one in the chat here. This is the first video of the half-hour Hegel series. If you're interested in reading Hegel, you can look at that series and read it sort of paragraph by paragraph with Greg Sadler. He's a very good lecturer, and he really knows his stuff in terms of the history of philosophy. So, you know, I'd recommend it. Like pick up the phenomenology of spirit. That this is the. This is the typical cover right here. This orange or this sort of yellowish kind of cover here. If you pick up that book and you read along with Greg Sadler, in my opinion, that would be your best way to understand Hegel instead of focusing on like secondary texts. Right now I'm focusing on secondary texts just to kind of put this map together. Michael Sugrue. I don't know if I know that person. All right. I just looked him up. I'll check him out after the stream. All right, Descartes. Rene Descartes. So he is in modern philosophy. Well, we'll say early modern philosophy. No. There we go. Descartes is very interesting. He is often, I guess, kind of, in some ways fairly, in some ways unfairly, kind of demonized. Let's see here. Pulling it up. There we go. Rene Descartes. Okay. Give me 3 seconds and then I'm going to come back and do Descartes. All right, Descartes. So, Descartes, he had a method of radical doubt. You know what? Descartes might actually be. It might actually be better to just straight up like go to the primary source for this. Let's see if I can find. Okay. So I had to go to. Here we go. This is the first meditation. I can give you like historical background on Descartes, and there's some stuff that might help, but really I think he's pretty clear, so we can just read through it. Why don't we do... Let's see if we can get through the first meditation here. So Descartes is a modern philosopher, so he's going to emphasize, in a lot of ways, emphasize epistemology. Epistemology just means the study of knowledge, study of what we can know and how we can know it. Why don't I add that to my chart? Let's say we'll give Descartes a connection to epistemology. What's really important is just prior to Descartes, we have something we have something called the Reformation happening. So during the Reformation, there was a period when a Roman Catholic monk named Martin Luther was sort of critiquing the Catholic Church for its what he perceived as its abuses of its sort of spiritual authority. Essentially, what they were doing is they were selling indulgences, which essentially was basically, hey, give the church a donation, and we'll make sure that your family member doesn't have to spend as long in purgatory or whatever. And Luther saw this and several other sort of theological commitments and practices of the church as sort of exploitative and as straying away from what he saw as like true Christianity. So Martin Luther intended to reform the church. The Catholic Church didn't take it well, and eventually he ended up creating what we now know as Protestantism. Right? He broke off the Catholic Church and sort of brought Protestantism into being. Right? A new type of Christianity that split off from Roman Catholicism. Now this, it seems normal to us now because there are so many Christian denominations. It just doesn't seem that weird. At the time, it was a huge deal because prior to that, there had only been one major schism between so-called Orthodox Christians, right? And that was between the Eastern Church and the Western Roman Catholic Church. And then 500 years later, you have this new split. And the thing is, the Protestants were in the same geographical sort of location around Europe as Roman Catholics, so they're very close to each other, right? It's not like churches off in the East are splitting off from churches off in the West, and we never have to talk to each other again. No, these are neighbors and friends and families who are now experiencing this very radical rethinking of religion, right? At the time, this bothers a lot of people, obviously, because people take religion very seriously. They find a lot of meaning in religion. They believe that their eternal soul is at stake, depending on if they're following the right path or not. And Luther basically says everything you know about religion is false. Let me tell you what true Christianity is, right? It turns out that this sort of begins to shake the foundations of how people think about sort of verifying their own beliefs, right? So if what I had grown up with my entire life as a Catholic was suddenly overturned by Protestantism, now I don't quite know what to believe, right? So this is the sort of historical backdrop that you need to understand. This is the environment that Descartes is functioning in, right? So he wants to try to find the sort of most certain basis for knowledge that he can. And we can talk about it a little more, but I think that's a good place to go ahead and start reading here the first meditation. Some years ago, I was struck by how many false things I had believed, and how doubtful was the structure of beliefs that I had based on them. I realized that if I had wanted to establish anything in the sciences that was stable and likely to last, I needed, just once in my life, to demolish everything completely and start again from the foundations. Side note here. Descartes holds a view called foundationalism. We can talk a little bit more about what that entails, but that's important to flag. He is a foundationalist. Foundationalism is a kind of epistemology that says you begin with basic beliefs about the world, right? Foundational beliefs about the nature of God, the nature of the world, the nature of the self, like these very basic ideas. And from there, you can sort of deduce all of the rest of your beliefs about everything else, right? So you have to have a solid, according to Descartes, you have to have a solid foundation. And as long as you have a solid foundation and you can think clearly from that foundation, you can have a certain knowledge of everything that you build upon those certain foundations. But remember, we're functioning in sort of the Reformation era, so people are very unsure about their foundation. So what Descartes is trying to do is demolish everything that he believes, and he's trying to find these very certain indubitable foundations, right? Indubitable just means it can't be doubted. There's no way to doubt it, right? Okay. It looks like an enormous task. Let me... It looked like an enormous task. Does he not deny that foundation just later in the sentence in that paragraph? Yes, well, what he's saying here is that he is looking for those certain foundations, but he doesn't know them yet, right? He doesn't know them yet. So he's beginning by destroying everything, wiping the slate clean, and then he will look for certain foundations. So it looks like an enormous task to start again from the foundations. And I decided to wait until I was old enough to be sure that there was nothing to be gained from putting it off any longer. I have now delayed it for so long that I have no excuse for going on planning to do it, but rather than getting to work. So today, I have set aside all my worries and arranged for myself a clear stretch of free time. I am here quite alone, and at last I will devote myself sincerely and without holding back to demolishing my opinions, right? So he's essentially saying, I have a lot of opinions, right? I have a lot of opinions that are false, right? Some years ago, I was struck by how many false things I believed. So what I need to do is demolish all of my opinions and find at least one thing, at least one belief that I cannot doubt at all. And from there, I can build further. You're saying, I mean, he said enormous task and think a different way around. I'm not sure what you mean. Sorry. So the enormous task here, let's see. Let's just do a little close reading here just to get clear on what he means. Some years ago, I was struck by how many false things I had believed and by how doubtful was the structure of beliefs that I had based on them. Right? So in other words, he realizes he believes many doubtful things, and probably many of the things that he goes on to base on those beliefs he calls them into doubt as well. Sir, I'm sorry, I'm going to leave. It was school tomorrow. This is a good class. Thank you. Yep, thank you. I realized if I wanted to establish anything in the sciences that was stable and likely to last, I needed, just once in my life, to demolish everything completely. It looked like an enormous task, and I decided to wait until I was old enough. I have now delayed it for so long that I have no excuse. So basically what he's saying is he's come to a good time in his life where he says, I have the leisure time to be able to absolutely demolish all my opinions and start from scratch, right? I can do this without showing that my beliefs are false, which is probably more than I could ever manage. My reason tells me that as well as withholding assent from propositions that are obviously false, I should also withhold it from ones that are not completely certain and indubitable. So in other words, he's saying, I know that I shouldn't believe false things, but I also shouldn't believe things that I'm not absolutely sure are true. I can do this without going one by one, which would take forever. Once the foundations of a building have been undermined, the rest collapses of its own accord. So I will go straight to the basic principles on which all my former beliefs rested. Right? So basically what he's saying is because, and again, he's a foundationalist, so he believes that all of our beliefs kind of rest on this, on these very basic beliefs that we found everything else on, right? He says if we can just get rid of the foundations, then that'll wipe out all of the other beliefs that are resting on top of it. This will become more clear in a paragraph or two. Whatever I've accepted up till now as most true has come to me through my senses. Is he searching for a foundation by which he can decide which is certain and which is dubitable? He is searching for a foundation that is indubitable. He is searching for a belief that cannot be doubted. And if he can find this belief that he is incapable of doubting, right? If he can find a belief that is so certain and so clear to him that he just cannot doubt the truth of this belief. If he can find that one thing, then he thinks he can build a whole system of true beliefs based on these certain foundational beliefs, right? So this first meditation, he's not building that system. What he's doing is he's destroying the system that he already has. So he says, whatever I have accepted till now has come to me through my senses, but occasionally I have found that they have deceived me. That is, my senses have deceived me, and it is unwise to trust completely those who have deceived us even once. Yet, although the senses sometimes deceive us about objects that are very small or distant, that doesn't apply to my belief that I am here sitting by the fire, wearing a winter dressing gown, holding this piece of paper in my hands, and so on. It seems to be quite impossible to doubt beliefs like this which come through the senses. Another example. So the first thing he calls into question here is the senses, right? Your sense of sight, your sense of taste, touch, sound, right? He says, it seems obvious that I'm sitting here by the fire, right? My senses are telling me that. I'm sitting here in this chair. I'm wearing this winter dressing gown. I'm holding a piece of paper, right? My senses are telling me this. But what he's saying is sometimes our senses aren't always right. So let's keep going here. Another example, how can I doubt that these hands or this whole body are mine? To doubt such things would have to liken myself to brain-damaged madmen who are convinced they are kings when really they are paupers. Or say they are dressed in purple when they are naked, or that they are pumpkins or made of glass. Such people are insane, and I would be thought equally mad if I modeled myself on them. What a brilliant piece of reasoning. By the way, this is not the usual translation that I use, so this is kind of interesting. What a brilliant piece of reasoning, as if I were not a man who sleeps at night and often has... Let me skip ahead a little bit. Here, this is good. Often in my dreams, I am convinced of just such familiar events, that I am sitting by the fire in my dressing gown, when in fact I am lying undressed in bed. Yet right now, my eyes are certainly wide open when I look at this piece of paper. I shake my head, and it isn't asleep. When I rub one hand against the other, I do it deliberately and know what I am doing. This wouldn't happen with such clarity to someone asleep. Right, so he's going back and forth right here, kind of like debating with himself. He's saying, all right, sometimes our senses deceive us. But it really seems like I'm here and my senses are reliable. And if I doubt my senses, doesn't that make me seem insane? Right? But on the other hand, right, we might be able to call our senses into doubt, because sometimes when we're dreaming, our senses seem to be telling us that we're doing something when in fact we're laying in bed asleep, right? So he's kind of going back and forth. Should I doubt my senses? Should I not doubt my senses? And he says here, indeed, as if I didn't remember other occasions when I had been tricked by exactly similar thoughts when I sleep, as I think about this more carefully, I realize that there is never any reliable way of distinguishing being awake from being asleep. This is a big moment for him. He realizes there's actually no way to tell if I'm awake or if I'm sleeping, right? And if I don't know if I'm sleeping or don't know if I'm awake, that means that I can't fully 100% trust my senses all the time, right? Doesn't mean my senses are necessarily wrong. It just means it is possible for me to doubt them, because I don't know if I'm dreaming. When you're dreaming, your senses, as far as Descartes is concerned, when you're dreaming, your senses are deceiving you, right? They're telling you that you're in whatever place you're dreaming about, when in fact you're asleep in bed. This discovery makes me feel dizzy, which itself reinforces the notion that I may be asleep. Suppose then that I am dreaming. It isn't true that I, with my eyes open and moving my head and stretching out my hands, suppose indeed that I don't even have hands or any body at all. Exactly, chat. Yes. Because the senses are not 100% reliable 100% of the time, they cannot be a solid foundation. Correct. And then he says, well, if I'm dreaming, I actually don't even know, I actually don't even know if I even have a body, right? He's saying, suppose indeed that I don't have hands or any body at all. Like, you could be dreaming, right? You might not even really have a body. Your mind, you could be some other kind of creature dreaming that you're a human, right? That's possible. He's not saying it's definitely true. He's just saying it's possible. And if it's possible, then that cannot be a foundation to build knowledge on. Okay. Still, it has to be admitted that the visions that come in sleep are like paintings. They must have been made as copies of real things, so at least those general at least these general kinds of things, eyes, head, hands, body, whatever, must be real and not imaginary. For even when painters try to depict sirens, satyrs, and the most extraordinary bodies, they simply jumble up the limbs of different kinds of real animals. This is a little bit of a digression. Let me skip down. Okay, these simpler and more universal kinds include body and extension, the shape of extended things, their quality, size, number of the places, and so on. It seems reasonable to conclude that physics, astronomy... Okay, so this is a good point to concentrate on here. Whether I am awake or asleep, 2 plus 3 makes 5, and a square only has 4 sides. So this is interesting. He says, even when you're dreaming, 2 plus 3 equals 5 in your dream, right? So there might be these kind of rational principles that are somehow certain. And then, of course, he's bouncing back and forth, so he goes on to doubt it again, and he says, however, I have been sure that there's an all-powerful God. And he says, so he has this thought experiment where he says, what if an evil demon is actually deceiving me? I don't know if that's in this chapter or the next one. Okay. Okay, so I will just sort of skip down here and I'll summarize sort of the evil demon argument real quick. The idea that he has is it might be possible. Again, it's not necessarily true, but it might be possible that there is some all-powerful demon or all-powerful kind of entity that is deceiving me at all times. So one really good analogy here is the movie The Matrix. It came out in like 1999. It was a really big deal when it came out. The idea behind The Matrix was that what you consider real life is actually a simulation, right? And you can sort of wake up and get out of the Matrix, but the idea of the Matrix is that you're actually living in a very, very realistic simulation, but it's a simulation, right? The idea here is if there were an all-powerful entity that were deceiving you, that were basically making your life, like sort of simulating your life, and you believed that, okay, I'm this person wearing this shirt with this body, and I'm holding these pens, right? You believe that all these things are true. They're coming to you through your senses, right? It seems obvious, but maybe all of these things are actually a simulation and you're being deceived by some supernatural entity, right? So Descartes didn't know, didn't have the same sort of technology metaphors that we have, but essentially what he's saying is, what if you're actually in a simulation? There would be no way for you to know, right? So I'll read this here. So I shall suppose, again, it's not absolutely true, but it is possible, right? So I shall suppose that some malicious, powerful, cunning demon has done all he can to deceive me, rather than this being done by God, who is supremely good, and blah, blah, blah. So basically what he's saying is, I don't want to think God is deceiving me, so let's just call it a demon, right? I shall think that the sky, the air, the earth, colors, shapes, sounds, all external things are merely dreams that the demon has contrived as traps for my judgment. I shall consider myself as having no hands or eyes or flesh or body or senses, but as having falsely believed that I had all these things. I shall stubbornly persist in this train of thought, and even if I can't learn any truth, I shall at least do what I can do, which is to be on my guard against accepting any falsehoods, so that the deceiver, however powerful and cunning he may be, will be unable to affect me in the slightest. This will be hard work, though, and a kind of laziness pulls me back into my old ways, right? So what he's saying here is, in order to think absolutely critically, I have to doubt everything. I have to doubt that I have a body. I have to doubt that my senses are true. I have to doubt my everyday experiences, because again, I might be plugged into a simulation. So here's the final paragraph of the first meditation. Like a prisoner who dreams that he is free starts to suspect that it is merely a dream and wants to go on dreaming rather than waking up, so I am content to slide back into my old opinions. I fear being shaken out of them because I am afraid that my peaceful sleep may be followed by hard labor when I wake, and that I shall have to struggle not in the light but in the imprisoning darkness of the problems I have raised. Right? Yes, you're skipping ahead to the next meditation where he gets the I think therefore I am. But the first meditation here, basically what he's trying to do is to define the scope of the things that he's doubting. Right? He's trying to define the scope of his method of doubt, if you want to call it that. And basically what he's saying is, even though it might not be completely certain, completely true, that there is an evil demon deceiving me and that everything I think I know is false, it is technically possible. And if it's technically possible, I have to entertain that doubt, right? He wants to find a belief that it is technically impossible to doubt, right? So what he's done in this first meditation is kind of wipe everything away, wipe everything off, and he's trying to then kind of begin building, starting in the second meditation. This one's kind of long. I don't know if I'm going to have time to establish the second meditation, but I'll go ahead and give just a very quick overview of how the rest of the meditations go. I really highly recommend reading the meditations. They're not that hard. I think Descartes' a pretty clear writer. I think they're fun, actually, to read. I don't agree necessarily. Most people don't agree with Descartes on a lot of things, but I still think he's worth reading and grappling with. Basically, how he ends up bringing the self back, God back, and the world back into his thinking. He says, okay, I've established that I might be deceived, right? I've established that a demon might be making my entire life an illusion or whatever. But what I do know, let me see if I can find it here. Yes. Let's go here. These two paragraphs. But there is a supremely powerful and cunning deceiver who deliberately deceives me all the time. Even then, if that's true, even then, if he's deceiving me, I undoubtedly exist. Let him deceive me all he can. He will never bring it about that I am nothing while I think I am something. So after thoroughly thinking the matter through, I conclude that this proposition, I am, I exist, must be true whenever I assert or think it. Right? This is, so actually, I think therefore I am is, I think that's in a different work. He doesn't say that exactly in the meditations, but this is basically what he's talking about. He's saying that even if I'm being deceived, I know that I am being deceived, right? I'm thinking very, very hard through these things. I don't know what I can accept and what I have to reject, right? But I know that I am the one who am accepting or rejecting these different propositions. So insofar as there is a person who is thinking, that person exists, right? Because otherwise there would be no one who is doing the thinking, right? So this is how Descartes basically says, even if I'm deceived, what I've discovered is that I am the one who is deceived, and I can't doubt my own existence. How could you doubt your own existence? There would be nobody there to doubt if you didn't exist, right? That's basically how Descartes establishes what he calls the cogito. Cogito is Latin for I think, right? Cogito, I think, ergo, therefore, sum, I am. So if you're thinking, you have to exist, because there has to be something that exists to do the thinking. So Descartes wipes away all of his beliefs, all of his commitments, and he's supposing that he's being deceived by a demon and that nothing he believes is true. And then he realizes, even if every single little belief that I've wiped away is false, I at least know that I exist because I'm the one who's doing all of this philosophy stuff, right? He then goes on to say, I have an idea of God within me because of, there's a lot of details it would take a long time to go through, but basically he says it's impossible for a finite person to come up with the idea of God, and God is infinite, so God must exist because God had to put the idea of God inside of my mind. That's how he establishes that God exists. And then once he has God back in the picture, he says, well, God isn't deceptive, God is perfect, so the world must be at least basically real, right? We can be mistaken in our judgments about like this or that thing about the world, but he says basically the world exists because God created it and God is not a deceiver. So that's basically how the rest of the meditations go. Super that was a very superficial speed run over a lot of it. At the end, please tell, what do you think people take wrongly about that famous quote of him? So, like, how do I think that people misinterpret the quote? I guess, well, there are critiques of the quote. And one of the critiques was raised by a guy named Bertrand Russell. And it's actually very similar to a lot of like Buddhist notions of no self, right? He basically says that thinking doesn't imply that there is a being doing the thinking. Thinking just implies that thinking is happening. So really what you should say is cogito ergo cogito. I'm thinking, therefore, or thinking is happening, therefore thinking is happening. So basically the idea here is that a lot of people think that Descartes kind of makes too many quick leaps once he is bringing back the self and God in the world and things like that. But I don't know. I think in order to really be able to talk about ways that Descartes should or shouldn't be interpreted, we would have to really go through the whole text, and that would take too long, unfortunately. But hey, how long have I been going? Oh, almost 2 hours. I think I gotta jump off soon, unfortunately. This has been fun, though. So we've got Descartes. Let's see here. Descartes is going to be early modern. Got epistemology, foundationalism. 2 hours almost. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. I might jump on another stream this weekend at some point. I really have no hard plans on streaming. I'm just doing it whenever I have a chance to work on my little philosophy chart, and I really enjoy interacting with you guys in the chat. So gives me a chance to riff on things, and it makes studying a little more fun. Before I jump off, I know, so do you do these lives on a regular basis, or is it just random? It's completely random. I have done some lives in the past. I used to have a lot of YouTube videos that I had on this channel, and I ended up taking them down because I made them so long ago. I'm considering doing more YouTube. I have a lot of things up in the air right now, but basically my family is out of town this weekend and probably some of next week too. So I have like complete freedom to, I guess, like study any way that I want, and I'm not interrupting anybody. So I just decided to jump on a live stream today. Maybe we'll do more later. Maybe we'll come back this weekend. It depends on if I have time to get back into this little philosophy chart. But yeah, totally random as of right now. But if there's enough demand for it, maybe I could do this on a more regular basis. So what did we cover? We covered Thales. Thales is a pre-Socratic. And then we hopped over to Hegel and German idealism. And then we talked a little bit about Descartes, and we basically read through the first meditation. So I don't know, that was a pretty productive stream. Y'all take care. I've got to jump off. I've got to eat and take my dog to the park. You want to go to the park, buddy? Yeah, my buddy wants to go to the park. So, cool. Good chatting with you. And yeah, I might randomly pop back on live again sometime tonight, tomorrow, Sunday. I don't know. But yeah, it's been good. I appreciate all the interaction in the chat. That gives me the ability to flesh out my thoughts even more, too. It sure beats studying alone. I'll see you guys later. I hope you have a good one.